I remember how my children looked at me when I finally found them again, like they were seeing a ghost. Because to them, I was one. My own husband had told them their mama was dead and buried, all while he planned a new life with my own blood. The day I disappeared wasn't an accident. It wasn't because I abandoned my babies. It was because James knew exactly what he was doing when he drugged my coffee that morning, packed my suitcase with my clothes, and made it look like I'd run off with another man. For 3 years, my children cried themselves to sleep thinking their mother had chosen to leave this world, while I fought through hell to find them again. What would you do if your children believed you chose to die rather than love them? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories of survival against impossible odds. Wasn't always the woman fighting to prove she wasn't dead. Once, I was just Ellie Mason from Cedar Creek, with dirt under my fingernails from my mama's garden and dreams bigger than our single-wide trailer could hold. Growing up, I watched my mother work double shifts at the diner, coming home with swollen ankles and a spine that never quite straightened. "Get yourself an education, Eleanor," she'd say. "Don't end up like me." So I did. First in my family to get a college degree, even if it was just the community college 30 miles up the highway. That's where I met James. Handsome James Winters, with his pressed shirts and that smile that made you feel like the only woman in the room. He was studying business. I was there for nursing. He said I had kind eyes the first time we spoke. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Looking back, I can see how he isolated me from the beginning. "Your roommate doesn't like me," he'd say. Or, "that study group is holding you back," always with a legitimate sounding reason. 6 months in, he proposed. My mother frowned when I told her, but she'd never approved of any decision I'd made. I mistook her concern for jealousy that I'd found a man who treated me well, who had prospects, who wasn't like my daddy who left when I was 8. The wedding was small. My cousin Rachel was my maid of honor, always so close to me growing up, practically a sister. She hugged me tight that day and whispered, "You got so lucky, Ellie." I didn't notice her eyes lingering on James a beat too long. Our first apartment was James's choice 2 towns over from my mother, from my friends. A fresh start, he called it. I believed him. For a while, we were happy. When I got pregnant with Tyler, James painted the nursery himself. He'd rub my swollen feet and bring me ginger ale for the morning sickness. But there were moments, grip too tight on my wrist when I spoke to the male cashier, a cold silence when I wanted to visit my mother. Marriage is about compromise, I told myself, making excuses for the control that tightened like a noose. When Emma came 2 years later, something shifted in James. He'd hold our baby girl and whisper, "She looks just like me, doesn't she? Nothing like your side." It was the smallest things at first. The way he'd check the mileage on my car, how he'd call repeatedly when I was grocery shopping, the family budget that required his approval for every purchase. While he bought whatever caught his eye, I didn't recognize the trap I was in until I was already caught. By then, we'd moved again further away, a house with a picket fence. That felt more like a cage with each passing day. The isolation happened so gradually I barely noticed. Friends stopped calling after I canceled plans too many times. The kids are sick, or James had a rough day at work. Eventually, invitations dried up entirely down my nursing career. The one I'd been so proud of became too demanding for a mother of 2. James convinced me to quit when Emma was just 6 months old. "I make enough for both of us," he'd said, his voice gentle but his eyes hard. "Your children need you at home." The world shrank to the walls of our house. My phone would mysteriously disappear when James was angry. The car keys were always in his pocket. Even my social media accounts gradually came under his control. "I'm just protecting you from online predators, Ellie." When my mother died suddenly of a stroke, James insisted we couldn't afford for all of us to attend the funeral. "You go," he said, magnanimous. "I'll watch the kids." I spent the 5-hour bus ride there and back in a fog of grief, returning to find my house key didn't work. I had to knock, wait for James to let me in like a visitor to my own home. "Change the locks after a break-in attempt," he explained, though none of the neighbors had mentioned it. That night, I found my mother's photo albums missing from the box I'd brought back. Must have left them at her place, James suggested. But I knew I hadn't. Rachel started visiting more after Mama died. My cousin, the only family I had left, bringing casseroles and offering to watch the kids. "You're so lucky to have James," she'd say, echoing her words from our wedding day. "A man who takes such good care of his family." I didn't see it then how her eyes followed him, how she always dressed a little nicer when coming over. I was just grateful for the adult conversation, for the connection to someone from before. The children were growing. Tyler, now 5, had his father's serious expression, but my gentle heart. Emma at 3 was all sunshine and stubbornness. They became my world, my reason to endure the increasingly frequent rages, the nights James didn't come home. The bruises I covered with long sleeves. Even in summer dot, there was no money I could access. No car I could take, no phone that wasn't monitored. James checked the call logs, read my texts, knew my passwords. "Marriage shouldn't have secrets," he'd say. Though his own phone was always locked, always with him, the worst part wasn't the control or even the occasional shove that turned into more as time passed. It was watching myself disappear. The Ellie, who had dreams, who laughed easily, who had opinions, she faded a little more each day, replaced by a shadow woman who measured her words, who flinched at sudden movements, who taught her children to be quiet when Daddy was home. And through it all, Rachel watched. Rachel helped. Rachel waited. I found the text on a Tuesday afternoon. James had forgotten his phone when he left for work in a hurry. It buzzed on the counter while I was washing breakfast dishes. And there it was, Rachel's name with a heart emoji beside it. My hand shook as I picked it up. The phone wasn't locked for once, another careless mistake. The message preview showed enough. "Miss you already. Last night was amazing. I shouldn't have looked." Part of me knew what I'd find, but another part needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that the sideways glances and lingering touches I noticed weren't just my imagination. The texts went back months. Photos I can't unsee, plans made while I was in the next room, cruel jokes about me, about my body after 2 children, about how easy I was to fool, and worse, so much worse, were the messages about after it's done, about how they'd be a family, Rachel, James, and the kids. My kids, they were planning a future without me in it. When James came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, the phone in front of me. The children were at a neighbor's house, the only friend I had left, an elderly woman who sometimes watched them for a few hours. He went through my phone, not a question. Not even surprise in his voice, just cold anger. "You're having an affair with my cousin." My voice didn't sound like my own. "It's not an affair when it's love, Ellie." He said it so calmly, like he was explaining something simple to a child. "Rachel and I, we have a connection, something real." "She's my family," I whispered, "and you're just holding us back." He took a step toward me. "I was going to wait, do this properly. But since you want to snoop, do what properly?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "Leave you? But you've made everything so complicated now." When I stood up, my legs nearly gave out. "I want a divorce. I'm taking the children." His laugh was the scariest sound I'd ever heard. "No, you're not. No judge will give custody to an unstable woman with no job, no money, and no support system. Who would believe you over me? The respected businessman against the high-strung housewife? "The children are mine," I said, stronger this time. When he hit me, not a shove or a grab like before, but a closed fist to my face that sent me sprawling. The kitchen tile was cold against my cheek. "The children are mine," he mimicked, standing over me. "Nothing is yours, Ellie. Not this house, not the car, not even your name. It's all mine. And when I'm done, you'll have nothing left." I tasted. Blood felt my eyes swelling shut. But something had broken loose inside me, fear giving way to rage, to determination. If he could plan my removal, I could plan my escape. But I never imagined he'd already planned for me to disappear first. The next morning came with a strange calm. James acted like nothing had happened. The argument, the revelation, the violence, all erased. He smiled over breakfast, kissed the children's foreheads, even brought me coffee in the chipped mug I loved. "Peace offering," he said, sliding it. Across the table, "We should talk later calmly. Make a plan." I nodded, sipping the bitter liquid. The children ate their cereal, Tyler's eyes darting between us, sensing the tension beneath the false normalcy. My face wore makeup to hide the bruising, applied with a shaking hand before the kids woke. "Drink up," James encouraged. "You look tired." The coffee tasted off too sweet with an aftertaste I couldn't place. But I drank it, watching him over the rim, trying to figure out his angle. By the time I realized something was wrong, the room had already begun to tilt. "Kids, go get your backpacks for school," James said, his voice sounding distant. "But it's Saturday," Tyler protested. "Now." James's command sent them scurrying. I tried to stand, to follow them, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. "What did you—" My tongue felt thick, unresponsive. "Just something to help you rest," James said, checking his watch. "Rachel's taking the kids for the weekend. You and I have things to settle." The last thing I remember is his arms lifting me, carrying me somewhere. Fragments after that, the trunk of his car, darkness, the rumble of highway beneath me. Voices? Arguing, a man I didn't recognize. Money changing hands. I woke in a motel room I'd never seen before. The kind with hourly rates and stains on the ceiling. My head pounded, mouth cotton dry. Outside the window, a neon sign for a truck stop buzzed and flickered. Nothing looked familiar. My purse was gone. My phone. My wedding ring. When I stumbled to the bathroom and saw my reflection, I barely recognized myself. My hair had been chopped roughly to shoulder length. My clothes weren't my own cheap, tight things I'd never buy in the room's closet. I found a suitcase with more of the same clothes for a woman who wasn't me. A wallet with $50, but no ID, no credit cards, no photos of my children, and a note handwritten. "Start over somewhere else. They're better off without you." I tried the door. It wasn't locked. Whatever James had planned, he expected the drugs to keep me unconscious longer, to disorient me more. He'd underestimated a mother's will to return to her children. Outside, the air was hot, humid in a way it never was back home. A newspaper and a vending machine told me I was in Louisiana, 2 states away from my babies, and that 3 days had passed since that last morning in my kitchen. While I was coming to in that Louisiana motel room, James was crafting the story of my disappearance back home. I learned the details much later, pieced together from police reports, neighbors' accounts, and eventually my children's broken memories. The morning after I vanished, James called Rachel first, not the police. They waited almost 2 days before reporting me missing, just long enough for concern to seem genuine, but for any trail to grow cold. "She's been depressed," James told the officers who finally came to take a report. "Struggling since her mother died. I thought she just needed some space, but she's never left the children before." The suitcase he'd packed with my things, the one not with me in Louisiana, was found in the back of my car, abandoned at a bus station 30 miles from our home. Inside, James had planted a handwritten note. "I can't do this anymore. Don't try to find me." My handwriting, forged by the man who had watched me sign birthday cards and permission slips for years. A final, cruel touch, a hotel receipt showing I'd spent a night with a man's name listed as the second guest. A man who didn't exist, a receipt James had doctored from a business trip of his own to my children. He told different stories based on their ages. To 7-year-old Tyler, "Mommy needed to go away for a while to feel better." To 5-year-old Emma, "Mommy loves someone else more than us." Seeds of abandonment planted in fertile, trusting soil. The police investigation was cursory at best. A woman with no signs of struggle. A note in her handwriting. A history of what James called emotional instability. They found no reason to dig deeper, to question the convenient evidence. 3 weeks after I disappeared, James filed for divorce on grounds of abandonment. The paperwork was sent to addresses where I'd never lived, ensuring I'd never respond. By default judgment, he was granted full custody of our children. Rachel moved in to help with the kids before the divorce was even final. The neighbors raised eyebrows but said nothing. In small towns, people mind their business when it's easier than facing ugly truths. 6 months after I vanished, James held a memorial service. Not a funeral, there was no body, after all, but a celebration of life for the children's closure. My photo surrounded by Lily, I was allergic to poems read by people who barely knew me. Rachel standing beside James, her hand on his arm. Her free hand clutching Emma's small fingers. Tyler refused to attend. His first act of resistance, though I wouldn't learn about it for years. A year to the day after my disappearance, James petitioned the court to have me declared legally dead. Presumption of death after abandonment, accelerated by evidence that I had been despondent, unstable. The same judge who granted the divorce signed the death certificate, and just like that, Eleanor Mason Winters ceased to exist on paper, while the real me, the living, breathing, fighting me, was washing dishes in a diner 2 states away, trying desperately to save enough money to find my way back to my children. That first week in Louisiana, I slept in a shelter for homeless women. The $50 James had left me bought a bus ticket to the nearest city and a cheap prepaid phone. No ID meant no motel room, no job applications, no way to access whatever might have remained of my bank accounts. Became invisible in the way only women without resources can. People looked through me on the street. Businesses wouldn't hire. Police treated me with suspicion when I tried to file reports about my situation. So you're saying your husband drugged you and transported you across state lines? The officer didn't even look up from his form. And you have no identification, no witnesses, no proof of residence in another state? After the 3rd police station turned me away, I stopped trying that route. I called our home number from a payphone over and over, but James had already changed it. I tried my old friends, but their numbers had been purged from my memory along with their addresses. James's isolation tactics, working against me even now out at the shelter. I met Luann, a 60-something volunteer with eyes that had seen everything and judged nothing. She found me sobbing in the bathroom one night, curled against the peeling wall. "I believe you," she said after I poured out my story. "And honey, you're not the first woman I've met who's been erased." Luann helped me get a job washing dishes at the diner where her nephew worked. Cash under the table, no questions asked. She brought me secondhand clothes that fit better than the ones James had packed. And most importantly, she introduced me to Santos, a community lawyer who specialized in helping undocumented people establish legal identities. "Your case is unusual," Santos told me in his tiny office above a laundromat, "but not impossible. We need to prove you are who you say you are." My mother's death left no immediate family to vouch for me. My fingerprints weren't in any criminal database. My nursing license was in my married name, in a file cabinet in a house I could no longer access. My birth certificate, I realized. It would be in the county records where I was born, Cedar Creek, Mississippi. Santos nodded. "That's our starting point." For 6 months, I lived on diner leftovers and tips from bus and cables. Every spare dollar went into a coffee can labeled "Kids" in my shaky handwriting. Every night, I fell asleep looking at the only image I had of Tyler and Emma, a blurry photo on my cheap prepaid phone, screenshotted from a public Facebook post by our old church announcing a children's Christmas pageant. When Santos finally called, his voice held cautious optimism. "We found your original birth certificate." It's a start, Eleanor. A real start. That night, for the first time since waking in that motel room, I allowed myself to believe I might find my way back to being a whole person again. Not just for me, but for 2 children who deserved to know. Their mother hadn't chosen to leave them, if only I'd known then how much further I still had to go. With my birth certificate in hand, Santos helped me apply for a new social security card. "First step to reclaiming your identity," he said, his desk covered with paperwork. "Then a state ID, then we can start the real fight." While waiting for these documents, I used the diner's ancient computer after closing hours to search for information about my family. That's how I discovered my own memorial service photos posted to the community Facebook page. James staying solemn in a dark suit. Rachel beside him in black, her arm around Emma. Tyler off to the side, face twisted in what the casual observer might mistake for grief, but I recognized as rage. The caption read, "Community gathers to remember Eleanor Winters, tragically lost to us last year. Supporting James Winters and children in their time of need." My hand shook so badly I could barely click through the images. And there it was, the final photo in the album. A headstone in the local cemetery with my name, my birth date, and a death date that wasn't real. "He buried me," I whispered to the empty diner. More searching revealed the announcement of James and Rachel's engagement. Just 3 months after my memorial. Their wedding followed quickly, a private family ceremony, according to the local paper society page. With each discovery, I added to the file Santos was building. Evidence of James's fraud, of the elaborate fiction he created. But it wasn't until my new social security card arrived that we could take the next step, requesting my death certificate. "This is where it gets complicated," Santos warned. "Once we have proof you're legally dead, we have to petition the court to reverse it. And that means confronting the man who put you in this situation." Fear gnawed in my stomach at the thought of facing James again. But stronger than fear was determination, a white-hot resolve that had been building since that Louisiana motel room. When the death certificate arrived, I traced my fingers over the cause of death. Presumed suicide by drowning. The location, a lake 2 counties over from our home, where my body had supposedly been spotted but never recovered. "He didn't even know I can't swim," I told Santos. "I've been terrified of water since I was a child." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Santos uncovered James and Rachel's marriage license. The date made me gasp. They had married on what would have been my 34th birthday. A deliberate cruelty or just careless coincidence? Either way, it burned. "There's more," Santos said, his voice grave. "I found another filing in the county records. James legally adopted out your children to Rachel last month. On paper, she's now their mother." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of his desk to steady myself. "He can't do that. I'm their mother. I'm alive." "Legally, you're not," Santos reminded me gently. "That's why we need to move quickly now. I've prepared the petition to have your death certificate revoked. Once filed, it will force a hearing." I stared at the pile of documents that proved my existence and my erasure. What if it's not enough? Santos's expression was grim but determined. "Then we find more. Every lie leaves a trail, Eleanor. And James has told many, many lies." I thought filing the petition would bring immediate action. I was wrong. The legal system moves at its own glacial pace, especially for a woman trying to prove she isn't dead. "Your case has been assigned to Judge Hartwell," Santos told me, his expression carefully neutral. "He's traditional, believes in the sanctity of the family unit, even when that family is built on lies." I asked. Santos sighed. "Especially then. Sometimes it's easier to believe a convenient fiction than an inconvenient truth." Our first hearing was scheduled for 3 months, out 90 more days of my children believing I was dead, of Rachel playing mother, of James getting away with what he'd done. 2 weeks before our court date, a thick envelope arrived at Santos's office. A restraining order against me, filed by James. The allegations were stunning in their audacity. That I was an imposter, a mentally unstable woman with a passing resemblance to his deceased wife, harassing his family during their time of healing. "This is absurd," I said, the papers trembling in my hands. "How can I be restrained from approaching people when the whole point is to prove who I am?" "It's a tactic," Santos explained. "Delays our hearing, puts you on the defensive." And it worked. We were rescheduled for next month. I've been saving every penny from the diner and my second job cleaning offices at night. But legal fees were consuming my resources faster than I could replenish them. Santos had reduced his rates as much as he could, but court filings, certified documents, and expert testimony all came with price tags I could barely afford. When I told Luann about the latest setback, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "From the shelter's emergency fund. Don't argue, it's what it's there for." The money helped, but the next obstacle came from an unexpected direction. The court required a psychological evaluation before proceeding. James's attorney had suggested I was delusional, believing myself to be a dead woman. The evaluation cost more money I didn't have. The court-appointed psychiatrist was brusque, skeptical from the moment I entered his office. "So you believe you're Eleanor Winters?" he said, not looking up from his notepad. "I don't believe it. I am Eleanor Winters." "The same Eleanor Winters declared legally dead 2 years ago?" "Yes, my husband drugged me, abandoned me in another state, and fabricated my death." He made a note. "That's quite a conspiracy theory." For 2 hours, he questioned my memories, my motivations, my mental health history. Every answer seemed to dig me deeper into a hole of his predetermined conclusion. His report to the court was clinical, damning. Subject exhibits fixed delusions consistent with Capgras-like syndrome reversed. Instead of believing others are imposters, she believes herself to be someone she is not. When Santa showed me the report, my chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. They won't even let me prove who I am. With fingerprints, with DNA? "We'll request our own evaluation," Santos assured me. "Find an expert who will actually listen." But each delay meant more bills, more time away from my children, more opportunity for James to entrench his lies. The system designed to protect families was protecting the wrong one. The artificial construction James had built on the foundation of my erasure. If you've ever felt invisible before, imagine how it feels when the entire legal system refuses to see you. If you've ever had your truth dismissed, imagine having your very existence denied. Leave a like if you believe in fighting for your truth, even when the world tells you you're not real. While the legal battle crawled forward, I couldn't stop myself from trying to see my children. Not approach them. I respected the restraining order that much, but just to glimpse them. To know they were okay. I took a Greyhound back to Cedar Creek, using 3 days of precious vacation time from the diner. Luann's niece lived one town over and let me stay on her couch. From there, I could watch the elementary school playground from a park across the street. The first day, I sat on a bench with a book I never opened, scanning every child's face. Then I saw in Tyler, taller than I remembered, his dark hair needing a cut. He stood apart from the other children, watching rather than joining their games. My boy had always been the first to organize a race, to suggest a game. This solitary child was new. I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from calling out to him. When the bell rang, he was the last to line up, shoulders hunched against the world. The next day, I saw Emma, my sunshine girl, her blonde curls tamed into tight, braids I knew I hadn't taught Rachel how to do. She played with 2 other girls, but even from a distance, I could see the difference in her. The spontaneous laughter was gone. She moved carefully, as if afraid to take up space. That night, I cried until Luann's niece brought me cold washcloths for my swollen eyes. "This isn't going to help your case," she warned gently. "If someone recognizes you here." She was right, but I couldn't leave without knowing more. The next morning, I waited outside the school in a borrowed car. When the children were dismissed, I followed the shiny SUV that picked them up James had upgraded from our old sedan. It seemed they lived in a new development on the edge of town, a house twice the size of our old one. I parked at the end of the street, watching as my children exited the car as Rachel ushered them inside. No sign of James, probably still at work. An hour later, a woman emerged from the house next door to collect her mail. Gathering my courage, I approached her. "Excuse me," I said, heart pounding. "I'm considering buying in this neighborhood." "How? Is it for children?" The woman, 50-ish, friendly, was eager to talk. "Oh, it's wonderful. Great schools nearby. Lots of families. Like that one." I nodded toward James's house. "They seem nice." Her smile faltered slightly. "The Winters?" "Yes, they keep to themselves mostly. The boy has some behavioral issues. Been suspended twice this year already." My stomach clenched. That's too bad. The little girl's sweet, though. Very quiet, doesn't speak much, from what I've seen. Had some kind of trauma, lost her birth mother a few years back. "That's terrible," I managed. "Tragic story. The new mom Rachel, she tries, but double quace." She lowered her voice. "Between us, that house isn't as happy as it looks from outside. Lots of shouting at night. I thanked her and walked away before my composure broke entirely. Back in the car, I sobbed against the steering wheel. My children were suffering, and I was powerless to help them. As I drove past their house one last time, I saw Tyler in an upstairs window, staring out at nothing, or maybe looking for someone he still remembered. Somewhere in his heart, what James didn't realize is that a mother's love doesn't die, even when she's supposed to be buried 6 feet under. Rachel Lawson wasn't just my cousin, she was the closest thing I had to a sister growing up. We shared clothes, secrets, dreams. When my mother was working double shifts, I stayed at Rachel's house. When her parents fought, she slept in my room. I never imagined she could betray me so completely. Santos suggested we dig deeper into Rachel's background. The more we know about her involvement, the stronger our case. I called Rachel's older sister, Diane, who had moved to Arizona years ago. We'd lost touch after I married James, another relationship he'd systematically severed. Ellie? Diane's voice cracked when she realized who was calling. But you're not dead. I finished for her. It's a long story. After the initial shock, Diane's surprise turned to quiet anger. I always knew something wasn't right about that memorial service. Rachel was too composed, too ready to step into your shoes. When did it start? Her and James? Diane's silence spoke volumes. You need to understand something about Rachel first. She's always wanted what you had, Ellie. Your grades, your looks, your confidence. When you got into nursing school, she applied to and failed. When you met James ... What about when I met James? She saw him first. At that campus coffee shop, she pointed him out to you, remember? Said he kept looking over at our table? The memory surfaced, Rachel nudging me, nodding toward the handsome business student. You think he's checking you out, I'd said. No way, she'd insisted. He's looking at you, Ellie. She engineered your meeting, Diane continued, and then watched everything unfold. She was obsessed with your relationship, always asking for details, pictures, updates. I felt sick all this time. I think so. When you got pregnant with Tyler, she disappeared for 2 weeks. Mom was worried sick. Then she came back like nothing happened, but something had changed. Where was she those 2 weeks? She never said. But after your mom died and you couldn't come to Arizona for the funeral, Mom's funeral. Rachel brought James, said you were too upset to travel, but he wanted to represent the family. They seemed ... familiar with each other. I didn't want to see it then. I gripped the phone tighter. Diane, I need to know something. The morning I disappeared, did Rachel know what James was planning? Another painful silence. 2 days before, you vanished, she called me. Asked how to get a prescription for sleeping pills. Said she was having trouble with insomnia. I told her to see a doctor, but she kept pushing, wanting to know dosages, effects. I'm a pharmacy tech, Ellie. I should have realized ... She helped drug me, I whispered. I think she did more than that. After you were gone, she told Mom she'd suspected you were depressed for months. Had all these stories about concerning behavior no one else had witnessed. She was building the narrative before you even disappeared. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined possible. Not just an affair, not just opportunism after I was gone, but active participation in erasing me from my children's lives. There's one more thing, Diane said. Mom kept all our childhood photos and albums. After Rachel moved in with James, she took them all, said she wanted the kids to know their family history. But when I visited last Christmas, I noticed something strange. In every photo with both you and Rachel as children, your face had been altered or blurred or cut out. She's erasing me completely, I realized. Not just from the present, but from the past. Ellie, Diane's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't think she just wanted your husband. I think she wanted your whole life. Diane's revelations changed everything. She agreed to testify to provide a sworn statement about Rachel's behavior before and after my disappearance. It was the first substantial crack in James and Rachel's carefully constructed fiction. Santos brought in a new ally, Carmen Vasquez, a former prosecutor turned victim's advocate. Her specialty was cases involving domestic violence and coercive control. She took one look at our evidence and committed to helping pro bono. "This isn't just about proving you're alive," Carmen explained. "It's about exposing the systematic abuse that made your erasure possible in the first place. We built our case meticulously. My fingerprints, taken at a private lab, match those on file from my nursing license application. Blood tests confirmed. My DNA maternal lineage when compared with the sample Diane provided. My handwriting, analyzed by an expert, exposed the forgery of my supposed suicide note. Most damning was the paper trail of prescriptions. Rachel had filled a prescription for powerful sedatives 3 days before I disappeared, not in her name, but using her mother's identity. Phone records showed numerous calls between her and James in the weeks leading up to my vanishing, always when I would have been at the grocery store or taking the kids to the park. We need one more piece," Carmen said during a strategy session. "Someone who saw you that day after James claims you left voluntarily." Santos nodded. "The motel in Louisiana. If we can find whoever checked you in." "James wouldn't have used a proper motel," I interrupted. "Too many cameras, too much paperwork. It would have been somewhere off the grid, cash only." "Then we need to find whoever helped transport you," Carmen reasoned. "James couldn't have driven you to Louisiana and back without someone noticing his absence." We pored over James's credit card statements from that period, obtained through subpoena. Nothing unusual except a gas station charge in a small town, halfway to Louisiana, made at 2 a.m. the night I disappeared. Carmen's investigator found security footage from that gas station. Grainy but clear enough. James's car pulling in, a second vehicle, a blue pickup truck following. 2 men meeting briefly, an envelope changing hands. "We need to identify that truck driver," Santos said. "It took weeks, but the investigator finally tracked him down. Mitch Larson, a long-haul trucker with a record of minor drug offenses. Faced with potential kidnapping charges, he agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. The guy paid me $500 to drive his drunk wife to Louisiana," Mitch explained in his deposition. "Said she'd had a breakdown, needed to dry out away from the kids. Woman was unconscious the whole time, but he swore she'd taken the pills herself. I dropped her at that motel like he asked, left the key in the note. Never felt right about it. While we built our legal case, Carmen insisted we also needed to understand the children's perspective. If we win in court, reunification will be its own challenge. These kids have been told their mother abandoned them, then died. Then they got a new mother in Rachel. The psychological impact is profound." She arranged for Dr. Leanne Mercer, a child psychologist specializing in parental alienation, to review the case. Her assessment was heartbreaking, but gave us a path forward. Based on the neighbors' reports of Tyler's behavior problems and Emma's selective mutism, we're seeing classic trauma responses, Dr. Mercer explained. Children who've been lied to about a parent often develop trust issues, behavioral outbursts, or withdrawal. But children also have an innate connection to their biological parents. With proper support, that bond can be restored. The final piece fell into place when Carmen discovered something none of us had considered: the life insurance policy. James had collected $250,000 after I was declared dead a policy. I barely remembered signing during our first year of marriage. "Insurance fraud," Carmen said, satisfaction in her voice. "That gets federal investigators involved. Even if the family court is reluctant, insurance companies don't pay out on fake deaths." By the time we returned to court, our 2-inch file had grown to 3 boxes of evidence. The judge, who had seemed so disinterested before, now leaned forward, eyes sharp, on the mountain of proof before him. "Your Honor," Santos began, "we are prepared to prove not only that Eleanor Winters is very much alive, but that her apparent death was an elaborate fraud perpetrated by her husband and cousin for financial gain and custody of her children. For the first time since waking in that Louisiana motel room, I felt the weight of invisibility beginning to lift. The courthouse was smaller than I remembered, its brown brick facade weathered by time and neglect. I wore a second-hand suit Luann had helped me find, my hair pulled back, hands steady despite the storm inside me. Today, after 3 years of fighting, I would face James and Rachel across the courtroom and reclaim my existence. James arrived. First, climbing the steps with the confident stride of a man who'd never faced consequences. His suit was expensive, his expression practiced concern. When he saw me waiting outside the courtroom, he flinched the first crack in his composure. Rachel came separately, clutching her purse like a shield. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her. Dark circles beneath her eyes. When our gazes met, she looked away quickly, scurrying to James's side. Inside, their attorney, a silver-haired man with an embroidered handkerchief, approached Santos and Carmen. "My clients are willing to consider a settlement," he offered in hushed tones. "Financial compensation, acknowledgement of identity, but the children remain where they are." "It's been 3 years, Miss Mason. Stability matters." Carmen's smile was razor sharp. "Your clients committed fraud, kidnapping, and identity theft. We'll see them in court." Judge Hartwell entered, older and more tired-looking than during our previous hearings. The gallery behind us was nearly empty, just Diane. Luann, who'd made the trip from Louisiana, and a few reporters from local papers. James and Rachel's strategy became clear quickly. Their attorney painted me as unstable, opportunistic, a drifter, who happened to resemble a deceased woman and saw a chance for financial gain. "Miss Mason may bear a striking resemblance to the late Mrs. Winters," he argued, "but DNA can be misinterpreted. Experts can be paid for favorable opinions, and documents can be forged." Meanwhile, 2 children have already suffered the trauma of losing their mother once. When their psychologist took the stand, he spoke of attachment disruption and developmental regression, arguing that removing Tyler and Emma from the only stable home they'd known for years would cause irreparable harm. I felt the case slipping away until Carmen rose for cross-examination. "Doctor, in your assessment of the children's welfare, did you review the school records showing Tyler's behavioral problems began precisely when his mother disappeared?" "I know. I focused on current functioning. Did you examine Emma's medical records showing she stopped speaking the same week her mother vanished? Or that she was speaking normally before then?" The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "Those records weren't provided to me." "One more question, did James or Rachel Winters inform you that the children were told their mother abandoned them before they were told she died? Or that they were given conflicting explanations for her absence?" "No," he admitted. "That would be significant information. By the time Mitch Larson testified about transporting my unconscious body across state lines, Judge Hartwell's expression had darkened considerably. The insurance investigator who followed detailed the policy payout and subsequent purchases. James had made a new car, the down payment on the larger house. When I finally took the stand, the courtroom felt surreal. I spoke clearly, meeting James's gaze directly, as I recounted the coffee that tasted strange, the fragment of memories, waking alone in Louisiana. Why fight so hard to return? James's attorney asked during cross-examination, "Why not start fresh? Somewhere else, as you seem to be doing in Louisiana?" My answer came without hesitation, because Tyler still sleeps with his left arm tucked under his pillow, just like he did as a baby. Because Emma hums when she's concentrating, a habit she got from me. Because they're my children, and every day without them has been a day without air in my lungs. Rachel took the stand next. Her testimony a series of rehearsed denials that crumbled under Carmen's relentless questioning until finally she broke. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she cried. James said she'd give up, start over somewhere else. He said she didn't really want the kids anyway, that she complained about being a mother, about being trapped. In the silent courtroom, her words hung like poison. James's face contorted with fury at her betrayal. Judge Hartwell called a recess, and I watched them leave separately, their united front shattered at last stop before we hear what happened next. Leave a like if you believe. No mother should ever have to fight to prove she exists. Your support helps more women hear this message of survival. Judge Hartwell's ruling came down like thunder. My death certificate was officially revoked. James and Rachel faced criminal charges for fraud and kidnapping. And most importantly, I was granted supervised visitation with my children while custody. Arrangements were determined. The first visit was scheduled at a family counseling center. I arrived an hour early, sick with nerves. Clutching a small photo album, I put together pictures of me with Tyler and Emma as babies that Diane had found. Proof of our life before Dr. Mercer, the child psychologist who had reviewed our case, would oversee the reunion. Remember, she cautioned, they'd been told many different stories about you. Tyler might remember more, but Emma was only 5 when he disappeared. Their reactions may be difficult. The small room had toys, books, comfortable chairs. I sat with my hands folded tightly in my lap, breathing through waves of nausea as the clock ticked closer to our appointed time. When the door finally opened, Tyler entered first. 9 years old now, lanky, his dark hair falling across suspicious eyes. He scanned the room quickly, his gaze settling on me with a complicated expression recognition warring with doubt. Emma followed, clutching the social worker's hand. 7 now, still blonde, still my heart walking outside my body. But her eyes, once bright with mischief, were solemn, watchful. She partially hid behind the social worker's leg when she saw me. Tyler, Emma, Dr. Mercer said gently. This is your biological mother, Eleanor. Tyler's chin jutted forward. Our mom died. That's what you were told, Dr. Mercer explained. But as we discussed, that wasn't true. Your father and Rachel made a mistake when they told you that. A lie, Tyler corrected, surprising everyone. They told a lie. Dad said Mom left because she didn't want us anymore. Then he said she died in an accident. Then he said she killed herself. They were all lies. The raw hurt in his voice made my chest ache. I wanted to rush to him, to hold him, but I remained still, following Dr. Mercer's guidance to let the children set the pace. You look like the pictures, Tyler said, addressing me directly. The ones Dad burned after the funeral. I kept some, I said softly, indicating the album beside me. Would you like to see? Tyler approached cautiously, keeping distance between us as he reached for the album. Emma remained by the door, thumb creeping toward her mouth, a habit she had as a toddler. When uncertain as Tyler flipped through the photos, his breathing changed. I remember this, he said, pointing to a picture of us at a pumpkin patch. You let me pick the biggest one, even though Dad said it was too expensive. You insisted it had the perfect face for a jack-o'-lantern, I smiled. And you were right. Something shifted in his expression, a tiny spark of belief. He looked up at Emma. Come see. It's the Christmas with the red bike. Emma hesitated, then crept forward, eyes downcast. She peered at the album from behind, her brother not looking at me. Do you remember anything about me, Emma? I asked gently. She shook her head, still not meeting my gaze. That's okay, I assured her. I remember everything about you. How you loved strawberry ice cream, but only if the sprinkles were blue. How you called butterflies flutterbees until you were 4. Emma's eyes flicked up briefly, then away. Dad said looking at old pictures would make us sad, Tyler said. So he got rid of them, but I still remembered. I'm so sorry for what happened, I told them. I never wanted to leave you. I fought so hard to come back. Why did Dad lie? Tyler asked, the question that must have been haunting him. I looked to Dr. Mercer, who nodded slightly. Sometimes adults make terrible mistakes, I said carefully. Your dad and Rachel did something very wrong, and now they have to face consequences for that. But none of it was your fault. As our hour drew to a close, Tyler had edged close enough that I could see a small scar above his eyebrow that hadn't been there before. Emma had moved to sit on the floor, halfway between me and the door, looking at the pictures but still not speaking. Neither child hugged me. Neither called me Mom. But Tyler, in the doorway as they left, looked back and said, "See you next time?" It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, but it was a beginning. While I was slowly rebuilding connections with my children, the criminal case against James and Rachel was gathering momentum. The district attorney, once skeptical, now pursued charges with unexpected vigor after the insurance fraud came to light. Financial crimes always get their attention. Carmen observed Riley. James refused a plea deal, maintaining his innocence despite the mounting evidence. Rachel, however, crumbled under the pressure. Her lawyer negotiated reduced charges in exchange. For her full testimony, I read the transcript of her statement with shaking hands. The conspiracy had begun long before I suspected, not months, but years before my disappearance. James and Rachel had been involved since Tyler was a baby, meeting in hotel rooms while I worked nursing shifts, planning a future together that didn't include me. But he said divorce was too expensive, Rachel's statement read. He'd lose half of everything, maybe custody too. Sighed Eleanor was an unfit mother, too anxious, too attached to the kids. We just needed to wait for the right opportunity. My mother's death provided that opportunity. With my primary support system gone, they accelerated their plan. The sleeping pills had been Rachel's idea, the abandonment narrative James's contribution. They never intended for me to be found in Louisiana. The trucker was supposed to take me further, to Mexico with enough cash and forged documents to suggest I planned to disappear. James said she'd eventually make a new life somewhere else. Rachel confessed. He said she'd be happier without the burden of motherhood. I believed him because I wanted to. As Rachel's testimony became public, other women came forward. 2 of James's ex-girlfriends described controlling behavior, isolation tactics, and financial abuse. A former business partner revealed fraudulent practices I'd never known about. The charming man I married was revealed as a predator who had perfected his methods over years. Most shocking was the statement from Mrs. Eden, our elderly neighbor who had occasionally watched the children. The night before I disappeared, she'd overheard James on the phone in the backyard. He was saying no hospitals, no records. Just make it look like she left, Mrs. Eden recalled. I thought they were discussing a television show. It wasn't until I saw the news about Eleanor being found alive that I realized what I'd heard. As these revelations emerged, my visits with the children continued. Tyler's initial wariness gave way to cautious curiosity. He asked questions about where I'd been, what I'd done to try to find them. He brought schoolwork to show me, small offerings of his life I'd missed. Emma remained silent during our first 4 visits, communicating only through nods, shakes of her head, or occasionally through Tyler. Dr. Mercer assured me this was normal for a child who had experienced such profound betrayal and confusion. Children often use silence as protection when their world has been turned upside down, she explained. Emma needs to rebuild trust at her own pace. During our 5th visit, I brought a small container of modeling clay Emma had always loved creating, tiny animals and people as a toddler. While Tyler read a book nearby, I shaped a simple butterfly, then pushed the remaining clay toward Emma. She stared at it for long moments before reaching out. Her small fingers worked deftly, muscle memory guiding them as she shaped a lopsided cat. When she finished, she placed it beside my butterfly, then looked up at me directly for the first time. I made kitties with you before, she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. The room seemed to stop. Tyler looked up from his book, eyes wide. Yes, I managed, fighting back tears. You loved making cat families. You named them all after ice, cream flavors. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Vanilla and chocolate and strawberry. And pistachio for the green one, I added, remembering that tiny exchange, just a few sentences about clay cats and ice cream names, broke something. Open. Emma didn't speak again that day, but she sat closer, and when it was time to leave, she carefully placed her clay cat in my hand. For you, she said, barely audible, to keep safe. Later that night, alone in my small rented room, I held that misshapen clay cat and wept with a hope I hadn't dared feel in years. With James and Rachel, both awaiting trial and my legal identity restored. The family court granted me temporary custody of Tyler and Emma. The transition would be gradual, first overnight visits, then weekends, building toward full reunification. I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment near their school, using money from an advance on the civil lawsuit Carmen had filed against James, the insurance company, and the hospital where Rachel had worked and stolen the sedatives. It wasn't much, but I filled it with warmth, second-hand furniture lovingly restored. Walls painted in sunny yellows and calm blues, beds with the softest blankets I could find, Their first overnight visit terrified all of us. Tyler packed as if for a camping trip: flashlight, pocket knife, extra socks. Emma brought her entire collection of stuffed animals, a fortress of fuzzy protection. "You can call Dr. Mercer anytime," I assured them as I showed them their rooms. "And there's a nightlight in the bathroom. And I made your favorite macaroni and cheese for dinner." Tyler nodded solemnly. "We'll be okay," he said, more to Emma than to me. That night, after stories and tucking in, I sat in the living room listening to the small sounds of children settling into sleep, a creak of bed springs, a whispered conversation through the wall, separating their rooms, the flush of the toilet, little feet padding back to bed. Around midnight, I woke to Emma standing beside the couch where I dozed off, her face wet with tears. "Bad dream?" I asked softly. She nodded, clutching a well-worn stuffed rabbit. "Would you like to tell me about it?" She shook her head, then whispered, "I dreamed you were gone again when I woke up." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm right. Here, Emma, I won't leave you again. That's what Dad said about Mom about you before, that you wouldn't leave, but you did." "I didn't choose to leave," I said carefully. "I was taken away, and I fought very hard to come back to you." She studied my face in the dim light. "Tyler said Dad made you disappear because he wanted Rachel instead." "That's part of it, yes. Did you try to call us?" "Did you miss us?" "Every single day," I told her. "Every minute. You and Tyler were all I thought about." She considered this, then asked, "Can I sleep out here with you?" I opened my arms, and she crawled onto the couch, tucking herself against me like she used to as a toddler. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breath warm against my neck dot in the morning. Tyler found us there, his expression torn between concern for his sister and a need he wouldn't acknowledge. "She had a nightmare," I explained. He nodded. "She has. Them a lot. Dad used to get mad about it." That simple statement revealed volumes about what their lives had been like while I was gone. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. During the day, we would do normal family things: homework, meals, trips to the park. Tyler remained watchful, protective of Emma, careful to maintain emotional distance from me. Emma gradually spoke more, though she still fell silent around strangers. Nights were harder. Emma's nightmares continued. Tyler began sleepwalking something he'd never done before, wandering the apartment, checking doors and windows. Dr. Mercer suggested a family therapy session after Tyler had a breakdown at school, shouting at a teacher who'd criticized his homework. "Tyler is carrying too much responsibility," she explained. "He's been Emma's protector, her translator, her buffer against the world. He needs permission to be a child again." In that session, Tyler finally cracked. "What if they take you away again?" he demanded, tears streaming down his face. "What if we wake up and you're gone and everything goes back to before?" Dad said, "You were dead. He made us put flowers on a grave with your name, but you weren't there. You weren't anywhere." I moved to kneel before him, his small shoulders shaking with sobs too big for his body. "Tyler, look at me," I said gently. "I'm right here. I'm alive. And I promise you, I will fight with everything I have to stay with you and Emma. I won't stop fighting. Ever." "Dad said he loved us too," Tyler countered, years of distrust in his voice. "Your dad did a terrible thing," I acknowledged. "He broke your trust, and that's not fair." "It's okay if you don't trust me completely yet. Trust has to be rebuilt little by little, like Legos," Emma offered unexpectedly. I smiled at her. "Exactly like Legos, one piece at a time until it's strong again." That night, for the first time, Tyler let me tuck him in, properly smoothing his hair back, adjusting his blanket just the way he liked. As I turned to leave, his small voice stopped me. "Mom?" My heart stuttered at the word he hadn't used since I've returned. "I think I remember you singing sometimes. When I was little." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Could you maybe ... do that again?" Healing doesn't happen overnight when your children were taught to mourn you while you were still breathing. But it happens, one Lego piece at a time, justice. Move slowly, even for crimes as clear-cut as those committed against me and my children. James's trial was delayed 3 times by procedural motions, each postponement stretching our limbo state further. Rachel accepted a plea deal 5 years for her role in the kidnapping, fraud and identity theft, eligible for parole in 3. When she was sentenced, I sat in the courtroom, Emma and Tyler with Carmen in the hallway outside. I needed to see this chapter close. Rachel didn't look at me until the very end, as officers led her away. Her eyes met mine briefly, not with hatred or defiance, but with something like shame. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough for what she'd done. But it was something. James's trial, when it finally began, became a local sensation. The story of a man who had erased his wife and replaced her with her cousin struck a nerve. Reporters filled the gallery. Cameras clustered outside the courthouse. The prosecution built a meticulous case, the sedatives in my system, the trucker's testimony, the insurance fraud, the falsified death certificate. James sat impassive throughout, his expensive lawyer spinning alternative explanations. I had been mentally ill, had staged my own disappearance, had abandoned my family and now regretted it. I testified for 2 grueling days, recounting every detail from the bitter coffee to waking disoriented in Louisiana. James watched me with the same cold detachment I'd seen when he stood over me on our kitchen floor that last night. When the jury returned after just 4 hours of deliberation, their verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced James to 15 years for kidnapping, fraud, and insurance crimes. Not the lifetime I'd secretly hoped for, but enough that my children would be grown before he walked free. "It's over," Carmen said as we left the courthouse, shielding me from shouted questions and camera flashes. But it wasn't not really. Legal victory didn't erase the trauma. It didn't give my children back the years of believing their mother had abandoned them, then died. It didn't restore the naive trust I once had in people. Some wounds leave permanent scars. Tyler and Emma watched the news of their father's sentencing with complicated emotions. No child wants to believe their parent is capable of such cruelty. Despite everything, part of them still loved a man who had read them bedtime stories and taught them to ride bikes, the father he had been in the moments, when he wasn't destroying their mother. "Does Dad know we're living with you now?" Tyler asked after the news broadcast. "Yes," I answered honestly. The court informed him. "Will we have to see him in jail?" I squeezed his hand. "Not unless you want to. That's a decision you can make when you're ready, and I'll support whatever you choose." Emma, curled against my side on the couch, looked up. "I don't want to see him, or Rachel." It was the most definitive statement she'd made about either of them. "That's okay," I assured her. "You don't have to." "But what if ... double quotes Tyler hesitated. "What if someday I want to ask him why he did it?" "That's okay too," I said, though the thought of my son facing his father made my chest tight with protective fear. "When you're older, if you have questions only he can answer, we'll figure it out together." The courts awarded me full custody, with James's parental rights severely restricted. Our divorce was finalized in a proceeding that felt like an afterthought after everything else. The civil lawsuit against James, Rachel, and the hospital was settled out of court, not a fortune, but enough to secure our future, to pay for the therapy all 3 of us would need for years to come. I returned to nursing, working part-time at a clinic while the children were in school. The familiar work of caring for others helped heal my own wounds. And somewhere along the way, I began sharing our story first in support groups for domestic violence survivors. Then in more public forums, women would approach me after these talks, some with bruises hidden under makeup, others with the hollow-eyed look of those who lived in constant fear. "How did you find the strength?" They would ask. The answer was always the same: my children, and then, eventually, myself. Because surviving isn't just about escaping the immediate danger. It's about reclaiming your story, your identity, your right to exist in the world as yourself. It's about rebuilding what was shattered, even if the pieces fit together differently than before. 5 years have passed since. I sat in that courtroom and watched James receive his sentence. My children are teenagers now, Tyler 14, Emma 12, both taller every time I blink. It seems We don't live in that first small apartment anymore. We have a modest house with a backyard, a garden I tend with Emma, a basketball hoop Tyler uses daily. We have a dog named Chance a Rescue with one eye and unlimited optimism. We have routines and inside jokes and favorite takeout places. We have a life. We're built from ashes, but stronger for it. The scars remain, of course. Tyler still checks the locks before bed each night, a habit I've learned not to mention. Emma keeps a packed emergency bag in her closet, just in case. I still wake sometimes in blind panic, reaching to make sure they're still here. Still safe, but we've learned to carry our wounds without being defined by them. Tyler plays basketball, his natural leadership finally finding positive expression. His coach tells me he has real potential, maybe even college scholarship potential. He rolls his eyes when I cheer too loudly at games, but I catch his smile afterward. Emma sings, now something she rediscovered in music therapy. Her voice is clear and true, filling our home with sound where once there was silence. Last month, she performed in her first school concert. When she took her bow, our eyes met across the auditorium, and I saw not just my daughter, but a young woman emerging from the shadows of her past. They still have questions, especially as they get older. Hard questions I answer as honestly as I can. Did you love Dad before? Emma asked recently. Yes, I told her. The man I thought he was. How do you know if someone is showing you who they really are? Tyler wanted to know, his first serious girlfriend bringing new worries. Watch how they treat others, I said. How they handle not getting their way. Whether they try to separate you from people you love. These conversations are difficult but necessary. I want them to carry awareness, not fear, into their futures. James remains in prison, eligible for parole in another few years. He sends occasional letters to the children, birthday cards, Christmas greetings. Tyler reads them. Emma doesn't. I never interfere with this choice. Their relationship with their father is theirs to define. Rachel was released last year. She moved to another state, sends no letters, makes no claims on our lives. I heard from Diane that she's working in a florist shop, starting over far from the scene of her crimes. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks of us, of what she helped destroy. I hope she does. As for me, I found purpose in sharing our story, not just here, but in person, at conferences for law enforcement, at training sessions for family court judges, at support groups for women planning their escapes. I want them to see that survival is possible, that erasure isn't permanent. Warning signs I missed in my relationship with James seem so obvious in hindsight. The isolation, the control, the way he positioned himself between me and everyone else in my life. If my story helps even one woman recognize these patterns before it's too late, then some meaning comes from my suffering. People often ask if I've forgiven James and Rachel. It's a complicated question. I don't carry the burning rage I once did. It would have consumed me if I'd let it. But forgiveness implies they've earned something I'm not sure they deserve. What I found is peace. Not the naive peace of my life before, but something harder won and more durable. I know now that I can survive the unimaginable. That knowledge carries its own kind of strength. My children are the true miracle. Despite everything they endured, the lies, the loss, the betrayal by those who should have protected them, they remain capable of joy, of trust, of love. They're not unscarred, but they're unbroken. Last night, I found Emma looking at the old photo album, the one I brought to our first reunion. She traced a picture of herself as a toddler in my arms, both of us laughing at something long forgotten. I remember this, she said, surprising me. Not the picture, but the feeling, being safe with you. In that moment, I knew we'd come full circle. Not back to where we started, that's impossible, but to a new place of wholeness, where our broken parts have healed enough to hold happiness again. If you're listening to this and fighting your own battle for your children, your identity, your very existence, know that you're not alone. The road is long and harder than anyone who hasn't walked it can understand. But there is light at the end, I promise you. Subscribe to this channel if you believe in second chances. Leave a comment with the words, "I survived." So I know you're out there too.